I want a divorce." Stunned by these words from my wife, Emily, I was at a loss for words. Emily had said this without giving me any reason at all. "My name is John, and I'm 28 years old. I live with just my wife. I work at an advertising agency. My job is demanding, and I've struggled to find time for Emily. Could that have been the cause?" Emily suddenly brought up divorce. No matter what I asked, Emily adamantly demanded a divorce, and eventually, I had no choice but to give in. To some extent, I felt forced, but I signed the divorce papers, and we ended up divorcing. Even after that, I couldn't quite forget about Emily. And no wonder, she was the most beautiful girl on campus when I was in college. Incredibly cute and kind to everyone. Her sleek, neat bob, and the dimples that appeared when she smiled. Emily, always surrounded by guys, seemed inapproachable to me. However, by chance, we ended up in the same seminar and started talking more. We both loved animals, and coincidentally, our thesis topics were related to marine and terrestrial creatures. We often visited zoos and aquariums together on our days off for research. We successfully completed our theses, collaborating along the way. Upon graduating from college, I mustered all my courage and confessed to Emily. I just wanted to convey my feelings, but to my surprise, Emily said, "I liked you too." It felt like a dream. I had managed to make Emily, the girl everyone admired, my girlfriend. I decided to become a man worthy of her. I diligently worked on my appearance and started working out. At my job, I spared no effort, becoming the most competent among my peers. I could do anything for Emily. Our relationship continued smoothly. Emily was thriving as an interior coordinator. We squeezed in dates amidst our busy schedules. After about 2 years, I started thinking about marriage. We were on a date at Emily's favorite aquarium. As Emily was looking at the fish through the glass, I said, "Can I talk to you for a moment? I have something important to say." When I called Emily, she turned towards me. It was just Emily and me there. All around us, various colorful fish swam gracefully. I pulled out a small box from my pocket and said, "Will you marry me, Emily? I promise to make you happy, no matter what." I opened the small box in front of Emily. At the sight of the sparkling diamond engagement ring, Emily let out a gasp of surprise. Tearfully, Emily gave her answer. "Of course, I'm looking forward to it." And just like that, everything fell into place, and Emily and I got married. We were on top of the world in both our careers and love life, fearing nothing. But the happy days didn't last long. After marriage, I became incredibly busy and couldn't spend much time with Emily. I thought we were still getting along fine. I never missed giving her flowers on anniversaries, and I hurried home whenever I could, just to be with Emily. Being with her was my reason for living. Despite all this, I was suddenly hit with a demand for a divorce. Right after divorcing Emily, embarrassingly enough, I drowned my sorrows in scams and gambling. No matter how much I drank, it was painful to see traces of Emily everywhere in this room. So, I threw myself even more into my work to forget about Emily. Fortunately, I was handling a big project at the time. I was practically living at the office. It was only several months after the divorce that I finally completed it. While I was focused on work to forget Emily, it seemed to others that I was passionate about my job. The project was a huge success. I got promoted. After achieving success at work, I got a long vacation from the company. But at home, I couldn't help but think of Emily. Unable to bear staying in my room, I casually went out. While wandering in front of a shopping center, I saw Emily walking happily from the other side. Next to her was a solid-looking man. I was so shocked that I just stood there, dumbfounded. Maybe she felt my gaze. Our eyes met, Emily's and mine. She also looked at me awkwardly. I let out a dry laugh involuntarily. I had somewhat expected something like this. There's usually only one reason a man gets divorced unilaterally by his wife. I had a faint suspicion that Emily might have found someone new. Even during our divorce, I actually asked Emily about it. She kept insisting it was not that, but it turns out it was. Seeing Emily with an unknown man, I couldn't stand being there. As I tried to flee from Emily, the man she was with suddenly yelled at me. "Hey, don't run away." He called out to me loudly enough for the people around to hear, and even grabbed my arm to stop me. I had reached my limit. I finally snapped, grabbing the man by the collar and shouting back, "You stole Emily from me. What are you talking about?" Two men scuffling in front of the shopping center. The passers-by started murmuring. Then, "It's not like that, John. Please, listen to me." Finally, Emily, the person in question, began to speak. But I couldn't stop the emotions I had been bottling up from overflowing. The man with her desperately tried to restrain me as I was about to lash out. Thanks to him, I was spared from being reported to the police by the bystanders. Emily calmly tried to reason with me. She wanted to talk and explain everything. I was taken to a cafe by the man. Luckily, there were no other customers. A convenient setting for our awkward triangular discussion. In the tense atmosphere, Emily quietly began to speak. "The truth is, I only have a few months to live. I'm currently staying at a hospice run by this man, Brian." I was so shocked by this sudden revelation that I couldn't find the words. Her lifespan, hospice, Emily. It took about 10 seconds before I could fully grasp the situation, and all I could do was silently listen to Emily's story. Emily spoke calmly. Soon after we married, she received a notification for re-examination during a health checkup for cervical cancer. I was busy with work day after day, and Emily had no pain, so neither of us suspected it was cancer. That's why Emily didn't rush to get the re-examination. A few months later, when Emily finally visited the hospital, the cancer had metastasized beyond her uterus, and the doctors couldn't do anything. Emily was suddenly given a prognosis of her remaining life. After that, Emily struggled terribly with her thoughts. I was a young, promising professional in the prime of my career. We had just married, and sooner or later, we had to think about starting a family. Emily needed to be hospitalized for treatment, which would require a nursing attendant. If she told me about her illness, especially knowing she had a limited time left, I would probably abandon my work to stay with her. Emily, thinking about my life without her, wanted me to focus on my career. So, she decided not to tell me about her illness, not wanting to hinder me. Emily has decided to leave me for good. It seems she intends to play the villain, believing that by doing so, it'll spur me to move on and perhaps even make me feel better, as I'd want to prove her wrong. In fact, she thinks it might even help me cut ties with my lingering attachment to her, allowing me to remarry someone new. Emily's heart-wrenching act of deception. I was completely fooled by it. The man with her was the owner of the hospice where Emily was staying. Brian, the owner, had always opposed Emily's decision to continue lying and was angry that I was being deceived. He apologized repeatedly for yelling at me earlier. But there was one thing Emily hadn't anticipated. That was my continuing love for her. No matter what lies Emily told, I couldn't simply forget her. Hearing all of Emily's story, I didn't feel angry with her. Instead, I fell for her even more. Emily's lies weren't for her own sake. Rather, she was sincerely worried about my future after losing her, even sacrificing our life together. Knowing that Emily was thinking of me until the end, I couldn't stop crying. I loved Emily sincerely, but more than that, I was loved so much by her. Emily spoke while trembling slightly. The sudden terminal diagnosis, the divorce, and living alone in a hospice. How much she must have suffered. I instinctively wrapped Emily's hands in mine. And I told her clearly. "Do you remember my proposal? I said I'd always make you happy, remember that?" As I spoke with a smile, Emily nodded while shedding tears, then asked in a small voice, "My time left is very short. Is that okay with you?" I said, "Of course," and took Emily's hand. Pulling the chain of my necklace out from under my polo shirt, I revealed, "Oh, my wedding ring that I gave you when we separated," Emily exclaimed in surprise, and I couldn't help but smile. Yes, it was our matching wedding rings from when we were newlyweds. Even though we were divorced, I always wanted to be with Emily. So I connected the two wedding rings to a chain and wore them close to my skin. I thought wearing them as a necklace would go unnoticed, and while it might seem sentimental, it was my heartfelt expression of love for Emily. I carefully removed the wedding ring from the chain and proposed, "Let's put these rings on each other's fingers again, so we'll never be apart." After suggesting, I slipped the ring onto Emily's slender ring finger. Emily, while crying, did the same to mine. After a long detour, we finally reaffirmed our feelings for each other. Next to us, smiling, Brian, the hospice owner, was crying. Clapping his hands, he said, "I'm so glad, truly glad." Emily was against it, but I decided to take a leave of absence from work for a while. My boss, who had also lost his wife early, understood and agreed to take over my work responsibilities. I brought Emily, with her limited time left, back to our home instead of the hospice. We decided to spend our final moments together. Emily made bento boxes, and we went to various places. We visited a local flower field, a ranch, a zoo, an aquarium, and even the top of the rock. The most memorable visit was to the National Aquarium, a place Emily had longed to see. The last few months with Emily were incredibly peaceful, becoming unforgettable memories for a lifetime. Several months have passed since Emily's passing. It's not that I don't feel sad or lonely. But Emily will always be in my heart. I will continue to live my life to the fullest, cherishing our memories. That's the promise I made in the end. My name is Ken. I'm just an ordinary employee. 15 years ago, I lost my wife, Emily, in an accident. While the grief has gradually faded, there isn't a day that goes by without me thinking of Emily. I loved her so much that when I heard she had died in an accident, it was incredibly hard for me. The thought of Emily, who was always there for me, never appearing before my eyes again, made me feel like my heart was being crushed, and I spent many nights crying. I was definitely at the lowest point in my life at that time. Now, somehow or other, I'm already 45 years old. Friends and family have suggested I remarry, but I'm not keen on the idea and have continued to decline. Deep down, I still believe Emily is the only one for me. I'm sure I'll remain single for life. That's what I thought, but a turning point suddenly arrived. It happened when I went to a client for contract negotiations. On that day, I was nervous for the first time in a while. The reason was that this time, my counterpart was the major corporation, Smith Group. Smith Group is a commercial company built from scratch by its president, Jack Smith. Its annual sales are incomparably higher than ours. Given that such a company might sign a contract with us, my boss, Will, handed this negotiation over to me, even though I was busy with other work. The responsibility is heavy, I muttered to myself, feeling the pressure. However, I've been in this career for over 20 years now. I've experienced quite a few situations. After my wife's death, I threw myself into my work to the extent that some of my colleagues started calling me the ace. Honestly, it's a bit embarrassing to be called that, but wanting to live up to expectations, I put my all into the negotiation. Then, as per your request, the person in charge smiled at me. It was the moment the deal was sealed. "Thank you very much," I said, greeting them, then let out a sigh of relief. There are some details to work out, so I'll be visiting Smith Group for the next 2 to 3 weeks to explain. After setting the date and time, I left their office. When I called to report the successful negotiation, Will was ecstatic and said over the phone, "We're going out to drink tonight. For now." He asked me to return to the office at my leisure to discuss the details, so I boarded the bus. Maybe I should grab something to eat at a shop on the way. That's what I thought as I gazed at the shopping street outside the bus window. But when I saw a utility pole on a road slightly away from the shopping street, my heart skipped a beat. That place is still a painful spot for me. It's where Emily, my wife, died in an accident 15 years ago. She was trapped between a car and a wall near that pole. Just imagining your loved one in such a state is unbearably painful. I took a deep breath to calm myself. That's when it happened. Suddenly, a woman in front of me started gasping for air and crouched down in distress. I instinctively asked, "Are you okay?" She looked to be in her early 20s. She seemed about to collapse, so I wanted to support her, but not wanting to touch a young person without permission, I awkwardly moved my hands in the air. The woman said, "I'm okay," and forced a smile at me, but her face was turning increasingly pale. I couldn't just leave her like that, so even though it wasn't my intended stop, I suggested we get off the bus together. Then, I helped her to a bench at the bus stop and made her sit down. "Sorry for bothering you during your busy time. It's okay. I have some time as I'm just returning from a meeting." I responded with a smile to the woman, who looked apologetic with furrowed brows, reassuring her. She seemed to calm down a bit and started speaking again. "Thank you for helping me. It's strange. I thought I was okay lately." The woman weakly smiled. "Do you have any chronic illness? You've been holding your heart since a while back." When I asked her, she replied with a bitter smile, "Actually, my heart is fine. It's just that, due to a car accident in the past, I sometimes have these attacks." Just now on the bus, as she recalled the incident, tears began to stream down her face. I was surprised but quickly reassured her that she didn't need to explain if it was difficult. "Actually, I lost my wife in a traffic accident too. There was a time when I was scared just to see a car, so I understand how you feel." Hearing my words, the woman's eyes widened and she murmured softly, "Is that so?" It seemed she might have symptoms similar to depression. I didn't want her to talk about the accident because I didn't want her to relive the trauma. "Here, take this." I handed her a bottle of water I had bought from a vending machine near the bus stop. She took the water from me with an apologetic look on her face, yet gratefully said, "Thank you." I stayed with her until she calmed down, and after a while, she called a taxi and left in the opposite direction. It seemed resolved. But then, I noticed a shiny keychain on the ground. She must have dropped it before getting into the taxi. It was a basketball keychain with the names of an elementary school and a club team engraved on it. It could be a keepsake. I regretted not asking for her contact details, just in case. The next day, as I returned to Smith Group for a meeting, I suddenly heard a female voice exclaim, "Ah!" When I turned around, I saw the woman from the bus the day before. "You are from yesterday. Why are you here at our company?" "Ah, I'm here for a business meeting." After explaining the situation, she was surprised and said, "What a coincidence. Are you an employee here?" I asked. "Yes, I work here at the reception." "Oh, my name is Maria Smith." "Oh, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Ken." "You said Smith." Hearing the familiar surname, I looked up, Maria then said, "Yes, I'm the daughter of the president, Jack Smith." She said it with a shy smile. "I'm surprised. I had no idea you were the president's daughter." Amazed, I remembered the keychain I found and handed it to Maria. "Oh, I've been looking for this. Did you pick this up?" She seemed very surprised. "I was planning to take the bus frequently for meetings with Smith Group, so I kept it with me, hoping to return it to you. If not, I plan to hand it over to the police. I'm glad I found you so soon." Relieved that I could return it, a smile spread across my face. Then, I noticed Maria's face turning red. "Ken, you're such a kind person. I've never met a man as kind as you." She looked at me with a dreamy expression, then suddenly with a determined gaze. "You're coming here tomorrow too, right?" Yes." Her intense gaze made my heart skip a beat. Unexpectedly, I found myself receiving proactive advances from the president's daughter. "Hey Ken, let's go out together sometime." Every time Maria saw me, she would come closer, inviting me on a date. A date? But I'm a 45-year-old man. What would people say if I went on a date with a young and beautiful woman like you? What's that? I'm a proper 23-year-old adult. I'm not a student, so you can't reject me like that. I chuckled awkwardly at Maria's devilish smile. I had never met such an assertive woman before. However, I continued to gently decline her invitations for a date. Considering her position as the daughter of the client's president, and the societal perspective on our age difference, which is over 20 years, there were endless barriers between me and Maria, but the biggest reason was the guilt I felt towards my deceased wife. I remembered the words of my proposal to my wife, "I will make you happy." I knew my wife was no longer here, but I thought that dating Maria might make those words I said to my wife seem like a lie. However, the next day, when Maria invited me for a date as usual, and I lightly brushed it off, saying, "No, you should go out with younger guys instead of someone like me," she suddenly started crying. "What's wrong, Maria?" I panicked. "It's just, no matter how hard I try to approach you, you never seem interested." And with that, she burst into tears like a child. I never imagined she was so serious about me. Me, of all people. "Okay, I understand. Let's go out for a meal next time." Then, she asked with a hopeful expression, "Really?" With her eyes moist with tears, she looked at me intently. "Of course, I'm not sure where young people go these days, though," I said hesitantly, and Maria confidently responded, "Leave it to me." Seeing her face change from tears to a bright smile, I couldn't help but laugh at her quickly shifting expressions. And so, we ended up going on a date at a nearby cafe. Maria looked stunning in her casual clothes. She inherited her beauty from her mother, as she said. I thought that the wife of a major company's president would naturally be beautiful. My mother was quite proactive, you know. Maria spoke about her mother. She purposely went to my father's company, catching his eye and initiating conversations. "A Real Panther, my mother is." "A panther, huh?" I silently thought that Maria definitely inherited that gene. As the date ended, Maria looked up at me with pleading eyes and asked, "Will you meet me again?" Yes. Eventually, I found myself repeatedly going on dates with her, persuaded by her insistence. Me, an old man, is that really okay? Her aggressive demeanor left me confused. Yet, I could sense her seriousness, not just playing around. It was only a matter of time before my feelings started to waver as I faced her straightforwardness. One day, I sat in front of my wife's altar. "What should I do, Emily? I haven't felt this way in a long time. I'm really sorry." I apologized. I was spending more and more time thinking about Maria. Can I really allow myself to fall for Maria? Confused about my feelings and pondering my future, I remembered a conversation I had with my wife. "What would you do if I cheated on you?" she asked with a teasing smile. I was startled, but she quickly added, "It's just hypothetical." This was after a friend of hers divorced due to her husband's infidelity. They were a happy couple, but infidelity ended their relationship. It seemed she was shocked by that harsh reality. So she was curious and asked me. I replied, "I don't even want to think about you cheating." Then, Emily responded with a slightly happy expression, saying, "Is that so?" Then I asked, "What if I cheated on you?" Then, she said, "Of course, I would divorce you," and glared at me in a loud voice. I was taken aback, but then she softened her expression and said, "But if I were to die early, you should find someone else and be happy." I was struck by her words. Remembering such a conversation now seemed so unexpected. But then, looking at my wife's portrait, I wondered, would Emily forgive me? Finally, I made a decision to respond sincerely to Maria's feelings, who cared for me so much. Later, I called Maria and asked her out on a date. She seemed a bit surprised and said, "It's unusual for you to ask me out." I planned to propose a relationship to Maria on that date. However, her response was shocking. "I can no longer meet you, Ken." I was momentarily stunned and asked calmly, "Is something wrong?" But Maria remained silent. "Is there someone else you like? I guess. An old man like me. You're tired of me." As I said that, she yelled at me, "Stop calling yourself an old man." After a while, I could hear her sobbing over the phone. She tearfully appealed to me. "I really like you, Ken. I just can't help it, but I can't. I don't deserve to be with you." I didn't understand what she meant as she continued crying. As Maria was about to hang up, saying goodbye, I urgently said, "Wait, please," trying desperately to stop her. "There's something I have to tell you." As I said this, Maria whispered, "Okay," and then added, "I have something to tell you too." She then suggested, "Can we go on one last date?" Since she insisted, I agreed to follow her to a place she wanted to visit. Days later, Maria led me to a location far from any typical date spot. It was near that shopping street. My heart started to beat uncomfortably fast. Maria, without a smile today. She led the way in silence. Where was she taking me? "Just a little further," she said, without looking back. Maria kept walking without looking at me. "No, it can't be," I murmured to myself repeatedly. Despite my disbelief, Maria continued walking towards that place, to the very spot where my wife had her accident. Then, Maria turned to face me once again. "This is where your previous wife died, right?" "Yes, it is." I had told Maria the details when she asked about my wife's death on our previous date. I remember her being shocked then. 15 years ago, after hearing about the accident, I suspected and checked. "I've seen your wife before." "What do you mean? Where?" Maria slowly opened her tightly sealed lips. "I was in the passenger seat of the car that hit your wife." I was stunned. The shocking revelation left me speechless. Maria continued apologizing through her tears. I'm sorry. The driver at the time of the accident was a 19-year-old university student. He didn't give off a distinctive character at first impression. Rather, he seemed quite serious. The car had a new driver's mark, and there was no sign of speeding or distracted driving. He had just gotten his license and was inexperienced. After entering a poorly visible road, my wife suddenly appeared in front of the car, and he tried to brake. But in his panic, he confused the accelerator and the brake, hitting my wife. I heard this testimony in court from the young driver. His words were sincere, and I could tell he was genuinely remorseful and trying to face his guilt. This made the accident even more tragic. The young driver was a university student and a basketball player. On weekends, He coached a basketball club at his old elementary school. That day, he was in the process of dropping off students at their homes. He seemed to be a kind-hearted person. Somehow, it felt wrong to blame just this student. There was no mirror at that corner, and no guardrail was installed. There were clear safety deficiencies. So, I told him to focus on safe driving in the future and did not blame him further. After the accident, mirrors and guardrails were installed at the site, and I chose to believe that my wife's death was not in vain. This was all I vividly remembered. I had forgotten, but the young student Maria was in the car at the time. I didn't remember the name of the child in the passenger seat. According to Maria, the accident still haunts her in her dreams. The moment my wife was trapped between the car and the wall. I knew Maria had trauma from a car accident, but I never imagined it was from the perspective of the offender. The time she had a seizure on the bus was precisely when we passed the scene of the accident. I always wanted to bring flowers every year, but I couldn't. I'm so sorry. Maria continued to apologize tearfully. At the moment of the accident, I was talking to the coach. I innocently asked how my shots were that day. Then the accident happened. If I hadn't distracted the coach, maybe your wife wouldn't have died. Maria said this and then bowed deeply to me, saying, "I won't come near you again." Her words pained me, and I instinctively said, "Maria, it's not your fault," while stroking her head. That accident was beyond your control. You just happened to be in the next seat. You're not to blame. I don't want you to suffer anymore. Before I knew it, I was holding Maria in my arms. She cried in my embrace. The university student who was driving has already paid for his mistake. As long as he continues to live without causing another accident, that's enough for me. I believe my wife in heaven would think the same. So, I couldn't finish my sentence. I couldn't decide then whether it was right for me to fall for Maria. Maria was also unsure whether it was okay for her to like me. Even though we had mutual feelings, we were uncertain whether to cross that barrier as time passed. Yet, I continued to stay in touch with Maria. Our conversations about daily happenings and good food were enjoyable, albeit simple. Eventually, I asked her out on a date and expressed my feelings to her. She asked me, "Am I good enough for you?" After nodding, I embraced her. Despite the twists and turns, we decided to start a relationship. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, I just want to be with Maria. I believe my wife in heaven would support our relationship,